Hump day, baby, and the work for fantasy GMs just getting warmed up as we head into the holiday season on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, your daily source for fantasy news, NHL betting props, and all of the hockey takes that you need. Let's tap into today's episode, which features a check-in on both of our listener leagues and what's going on with the Buffalo Sabres. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Back in the booth for the latest edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out to the everydayers, much love, salute, and thank you so much for being there and holding us down every single day. We could not be doing the show without you guys. Seeing you in the comments, in the DMs, on Twitter means the most to both Steele and I. So thank you sincerely from the both of us for continuing to support the pod. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Start the seasons big with a big return on FanDuel, where new customers that place a $5 wager and hit get $150 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I think I got to keep this preamble extra short, Mr. Roden, because there's a lot going on today's episode. We're going to try and cover it all for you, as we always do. 30 minutes, including bets at the end of every single show. We'll get there for Wednesday's board. Only a couple of games on tap, but I got some picks ready to throw your way. We're checking in on both of our listener leagues. So much interest this year from our supporters that wanted to get in the ring with us, Steele. So far, I'm getting punched to the floor in a couple of them, so we'll talk about it. You, on the other hand, holding the pod down in a big way. The Buffalo Sabres, though, this has to be discussed. I don't know what you think. I have my own takes, but over to you for what you're seeing. This is a complete mess in Buffalo.
Yeah, an absolute meltdown right now in Sabre Nation. And, you know, there's a lot of fantasy pieces. We talked about them being a gold mine with a lot of young guys in the lineup in deeper formats. You know, we talked about Zach Benson. We've talked about Dylan Cozens. We know what we're going to get out of guys like Alex Tuch and Tage Thompson offensively, who have been fantasy studs over the last few seasons of their career. To me, where I really want to look at this is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen right now. Definitely been a tough stretch for him over the last seven. Like you said, 7-game losing streak for the Buffalo Sabres currently. Jason Zucker letting the team know about it, telling everybody in the dressing room to look at themselves in the mirror and start to wake up here, because the season is slipping very, very quickly for these Sabres. But, you know, we had a listener comment on the channel. You know, we talked about the Colorado Avalanche, Mackenzie Blackwood being acquired by them. And someone commented on the channel, would you drop Bobrovsky or UPL to go and add Mackenzie Blackwood? And I just responded immediately and said, I would definitely lean to dropping UPL at this point and giving Mackenzie Blackwood a very good stretch with the Colorado Avalanche. He's been playing pretty good, like we talked about on last episode. So, you know, obviously with the fantasy pieces, you're not going to drop the likes of guys like Tage Thompson, Alex Tuch. Obviously, Rasmus Dahlin's been on the IR for the last 3 games too. There's a few guys in there. UPL is one of them that I think might be droppable at this point. Dylan Cozens is also another guy who's been very sloppy and slow in the offensive zone. You know, a guy that we've talked about in the past very highly. So it's been a tough stretch for them. The season's slipping away, like I said, but those top tier guys, fantasy-wise, Tage Thompson, goal-scoring machine. Alex Tuch is still getting it done in all the peripheral categories, offensively, power play, so much and so on. So, I mean, there's fantasy pieces. There's good and there's bad with this Sabres team. Right now, it's a lot of bad with the 7-game losing streak.
When they blew, I believe, a 4-goal lead to the Colorado Avalanche the other night, or they were up 4-1. Then alarm bells start to go off. Close game, they lose an OT to the Jets 3-2. Then they get pumped by Utah. And then they lose in the fashion that which they did the other night.
Like I said that would happen.
To the Detroit Red Wings. Yes, you did. Is just now you have to really start to take a deep look here, because this is what I posed to you off air. You might start to seriously consider getting away from the UPLs of the world. Owen Power, once again, a disappointment. Bowen Byram, a little bit disappointing. Yeah, Rasmus Dahlin, he's still probably too good and too much stock invested to even consider dropping him because points-wise in production, he's been there. But this team the other night against Detroit, Steele, they get outshot 31-21. They get dusted in the faceoffs 56% to 44. They also get absolutely demolished in giveaways. And then you read into this a little bit more, and this is not just up front. This is back to front. And yes, there is still fantasy intrigue, most definitely. But when things start to go south in the nature that they are in Buffalo, we got to come on here and highlight it. Number one, and number two, this could soon have fantasy impact. The team's still scoring goals. They are still in most of these games right now. But if they continue to lose in this season tailspins, I don't know if you saw Kevin Adams' comments in the media about it not being a destination city. We see this a lot, you and I. Something doesn't smell right in that dressing room in Buffalo, when really it should. Lots of young, talented, like-minded players that have all been brought up for the most part through this system. So to me, something's not right in the water in Buffalo. So for now, yeah, you're happy with what you're getting from Tuck, even though he's been cold of late. Rasmus Dahlin's not going anywhere. Tage Thompson, aside from that injury spell, he has been sensational for you fantasy-wise. Sooner than later, though, Steele, I'm going to start to get very concerned that perhaps that production tapers off. And I just have one more point to make. We've brought this up about this Buffalo team very recently, how successful they were 2 years ago on the power play. Offensively, right there at the top of the league. And I looked at the power play because we expected it to get better. They are only outperforming the New York Islanders and Boston Bruins. They are 30th in the NHL in power play proficiency. And that is alarming considering all of the talent that they have up front and on the back end, actually.
Yeah, and it's tough. And to go back to Dylan Cozens again, his name has been out there from what I've read about potentially being a piece to be traded with teams looking to acquire him. And again, it's from a perspective of the Buffalo Sabres organization. You know, for the lack of success he's had so far this year, he could be a trading piece that they do at the trade deadline. But they're scared to pull the trigger because if you look at some of the guys they've let go in the past, traded, let test free agent, Brandon Montour, Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, Ryan O'Reilly, a lot of these guys who have been drafted there or have had success early on in their careers, decided to test the market, was traded, and look where they've done multiple Stanley Cup champions, actually all four of them Stanley Cup champions. So it's a tough situation for the Buffalo Sabres, especially on this 7-game skid. We're going to get over to the checking in with the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast Listener League, competitive and casual. Flip and I are getting after it. Maybe not so much Flip in the competitive league, but nevertheless, it is up here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can check the standings right now. We're going to talk about the competitive league first. We're going to get to a blockbuster trade that just happened the other day as well. We'll talk about the casual league and, of course, big time bets at the end of the episode. But as you can see right here, these are the standings. Your boy, the steamy locomotive in
Thank
first
goodness.
place. Big Flips booze
Thank goodness.
in 16th right now.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Steele, I got you right where I want you, okay?
Yeah,
this is what I do, baby. This is what I do. No, I'm kidding. It's been a mess for me.
The Mackenzie Blackwood ad is going to do huge things for your team.
It's Arvid Soderblom season, baby, and Scotty Wedgwood as well. Look, let me just hit you with my take about my team super, super fast, and we can get into yours after the break, which is much more, I would say, serving to our listeners. I went back to look at the draft and where I took some players, and that's what I'm kind of looking at here. The start of my draft, Leon Draisaitl I got at 5th. Victor Hedman at 28th. Then I go Gensel. Those first 3 rounds I'm totally fine with. For me, it was my 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds that I think are really letting me down. I reached on Miro Heiskanen, which you warned me not to do. He has been, for the most part, underwhelming. Then I reached a little bit on Sorokin, who has also been disappointing. And then I follow that up with Alex Tuck, who until about 2 weeks ago was pretty good, but he has gone ice cold. And then you look at other guys, much like yourself, in those 4th, 5th, and 6th round, Steele. This is where the real difference has been made, I think, in my opinion. Look at yours. Sebastian Aho in the 4th. Clayton Keller in the 5th. And how about in the 7th? Martin Necas. So right therein lies, I think, a little bit of insight into our listeners in terms of how critical those rounds can be, but also how well you drafted. I want to talk about your thoughts on those players that you drafted in those rounds right after the break. Thank goodness one of us is holding it down at least a little bit in this one. I'm doing a little bit better in our casual league. We'll talk about that after the break as well. And of course, big time bets. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. You know it's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers that bet $5 and hit get $150 back in bonus bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place your bets live on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the same page you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with that $150 in bonus bets. If your first wager hits, that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Make sure you continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip and I appreciate all that love and support you show us. Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. So again, thank you so much for all the feedback, all the interaction we've been getting on Twitter and YouTube as well. You guys and gals have been loving the polls we've been putting out. So thank you so much for all of that feedback, interaction that we've been getting. We're going to continue to do so as much as possible to get your opinions on all of the hottest news fantasy-wise in the National Hockey League and your fantasy hockey leagues. Back to the competitive league right now that we're doing with a bunch of listeners out there. Still in first place from the last time we've talked about, did our last check-in. It's been an absolute whirlwind of a season so far. I haven't had to do too much, honestly. I've only made...
Must be nice.
It's been pretty nice so far in the competitive league, for that matter. I've only made 16 moves, 16 ads off the waiver wire. Haven't made a trade yet. I have been trying to get something cooking up as much as possible, maybe some help on the blue line, but I've been very solid. And like you said, you have to have a really good foundation with your draft. And I drafted very, very good, in my opinion.
Agreed.
From what I've done in the past. Martin Necas in the 7th, I believe you said,
yes,
was an absolute steal.
That might be the steal of the draft.
That might be the steal of the draft. But obviously, again, fortunate to get him at that place. I believe I said this before. I have him in all 3 of my Yahoo fantasy leagues right now. And again, he's obviously outperforming his average, his ADP is outperforming a lot of players than what we expected. Probably the best player for the Carolina Hurricanes. So he's been very fantastic. First place right now. What I want to highlight real quick before I put it back over to you is, just to keep in perspective, the total categories added up throughout every single week so far. So even though I'm in first place, there's always room to improve. There's always room to grow your team, just like we're going to get to with one of the blockbuster trades that just happened. But just looking at this right here on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see here in the bottom left corner that I'm in 4th right now I'm in 4th last in goals. So, there's still some opportunity for me to, again, waiver wire ads, make a trade for some help in the goal department or in the goal category. But again, keep in mind where you are in each of these categories if you're in a categorical league. So I'm 4th last, I'm 12th in goals, but I'm 2nd in assists right now. So there's a few categories where I'm absolutely dominating, and there's a couple of categories out there where it's been a tough situation on a weekly basis, but I'm still coming out with the winning record.
And this is a situation where at this period of time in the schedule, Steele, what you're mentioning in terms of tinkering with your roster, a lot of GMs start that season hot and heavy. If they're not performing well, the rush to the waiver wire, the rush to make moves. Now I feel like is a bit more of a holding pattern situation. Yes, of course, you want to jump on someone who's going hot or let go of someone who's going cold and capitalize on trade opportunities. But I alluded to it on yesterday's episode. This is what GMs in the actual NHL game are doing. They're assessing rosters. They're looking around. They're poking in. They're taking stock of what their team is doing and where they're headed. And sometimes I think you and I have done a couple episodes about players who could really benefit from a change of scenery. Fantasy-wise, if you have someone that you've been invested to, perhaps like someone in this trade that I'm looking at here, like Jonathan Marchessault, who started the season slow and maybe ignites in the second half of the season, and I'm not saying he's being traded elsewhere. I'm just saying that these players that start cold and go hot and vice versa, you're going to have to get a little bit of a feel for that and a little bit to this certain extent get lucky. So that's another one of those angles that in terms of moves and ads right now, a little bit of a tricky time until after the holiday season, but you can't be complacent ever. Why don't you break down that trade a little bit more for us in detail? I believe that's the move you wanted to get to. And then we can talk a little bit briefly about the Canucks and get into our casual league and, of course, bets. Lots to get to with 15 minutes left.
Yeah, blockbuster trade in the competitive league. We just want to touch on this real quick. J.T. Fire Pandas, who's currently in second place. He is right behind me. He's nipping at my tails right now. And he made a blockbuster trade for Nikita Kucherov and Jonathan Marchessault in return to the Askarov bench press, Andrei Svechnikov, Patrick Laine, and Will Cooley right now. So massive trade. I think both teams get exactly what they need. I believe the Askarov bench press, Sean's team, is great name, first of all. I believe he's in 14th or 13th place right now. He's at the bottom of the league, closer to the bottom of the league, and he's just looking for some help to fill out those peripherals. You can see the stats here. Shake things up big time. Svechnikov, who was a high risk, high reward player that we talked about before the season. He's been amazing. 11 goals, 13 assists, 13 power play points, filling out the peripherals with the shots and hits. Patrick Laine, obviously back in the lineup for Montreal, and he's been very solid for them offensively. We never questioned his talent. It was the ability to stay healthy was what we always came back to with him. And then Will Cooley, the big surprise for the New York Rangers.
My boy.
He says right there behind Artemi Panarin, second in points for the New York Rangers, 10 goals, 12 assists, also filling out the peripherals. 108 hits at this point in the season is absolutely ridiculous, but he's getting it done in all facets of the game. So massive trade. What's your opinion, initial thoughts on this trade from the competitive league?
First and foremost, you know how I feel about Will Cooley. Shout out to Fern Avenue Public School. Shout out to Falcons. Shout out to West End. And shout out Parkdale. PK all day, baby. I'll say this. Right away when I look at that, I think that's a very smart GM dangling someone in Patrick Laine who, yeah, it's attractive still. Yeah, it's kind of flashy. And it's like, hey, look, he's got 3 goals since returning. And that's intriguing. But then combining that with, let me be clear, Will Cooley can bring it with the body. He brings it with the energy. I really love his upside. But the point production will not last with this player. It's not his game. He also is struggling to get those minutes in, and that will continue to happen. And I know he's got a little bit more of an opportunity. I know you're looking at his numbers there. However, I think this is a really good job of a GM taking 2 players and maximizing on their value in Cooley and Laine here and getting the best player in the trade in Laine. I believe that's what's in Nikita Kucherov.
Yeah.
Get that little bonus bump in the second player in the trade of Jonathan Marchessault, who's a sleeping giant. The Predators aren't going to be this bad all year. Are they going to be the cup threat that we expected them to? I don't think so. But they will be better sooner than later. And Trotz is going to shake things up. I was just talking about what can happen when players are involved or around trades. So I think J.T. Fire Pandas made out like bandits in this one, even though at surface level, Laine, Cooley, Svechnikov bringing so much value. To me, Laine and Cooley are almost throw-ins, even though they're bringing that value this season. And you got the 2 Kucherov and Marchessault kind of nugs there. That's how I'm looking at this deal. I think this is a very fair trade, though. I'm not trying to say one got fleeced over the other, but that's my take. Capitalizing on Cooley and Laine, who are 2 very hot names right now.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Again, blockbuster of a trade. Biggest name there is Nikita Kucherov, who's been absolutely incredible for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I mean, it's just been, that's just a great move. Again, I think both GMs out there get exactly what they need, but specifically in JT Fire Panda's team and what he's been able to do so far, just adding that caliber of a player for his fantasy hockey team. So again, second place right now, making moves. He's trying to get into that first spot. I won't let him do it. I'm going to keep firing at all cylinders, making sure I remain number one top dog in the competitive league. After the break, we're going to get to the casual check-in as well. We're going to talk about the Vancouver Canucks shortly, as well as get to big-time bets like we do on every single episode. But first, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And the goal is very simple. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings pour in all season long. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. You can win 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Kirill Kaprizov, 2+ goals. Adam Fox, 4+ shots. The possibilities are endless. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive this bonus. It is guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. Flip, we're going to quickly check in with the casual league and then get over to big time bets, where the money is made on this episode. But yeah, casual league, a little bit better for you, a lot worse for me in this matter in the standings. But still, I believe we're still both in a playoff spot. You've
moved up actually in this one, Steele, as of the last couple of days.
Yeah,
so
moved up, but still worse than the competitive one.
Well, you're in first in competitive, so that's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's always gonna be worse than that.
Yeah.
But you're in 8th place. I'm in 7th place right now, so we both still are currently in a playoff spot, but definitely a lot better of a season so far on your team.
I'm just trying to swing for the playoffs in both, Steele. Look, you're not out of it, even though I'm in last place, and it's not an excuse. You know how hectic my outside of hockey life has been, and that really doesn't matter. You and I come on here all the time and say you really just have to put that time in and put the dedication in, and I just straight up haven't had that time of late, and it's not copping out. And when I look at my team, I got Brady Tkachuk first in the 10th spot. Then I have a bunch of players that have really let my team down, Steele. Evan Bouchard, 23rd overall, disappointing. Vincent Trocheck, 42nd overall, disappointing. Sorokin again, disappointing. Heiskanen again, disappointing. And right off the top, thank goodness I have Matt Boldy in there at 6th. And then in the 7th round, I got Philip Gustafson. Your 2 Minnesota Wild guys are really saving my bacon here. Because then I go on to take a whole bunch of really just picks that haven't panned out. Blake Coleman, Teuvo Teravainen, Keandre Miller, Jonathan Huberdeau. I don't know what I was smoking at the end of this draft, Steele, but it wasn't pretty. I've had to get a little creative and keep myself hanging in there with Philip Gustafson, but it made me think of this. If you are in multiple leagues, and I think this is what I've fallen victim to here, is almost going with the same chunk of players.
Yeah,
you heard
that's what
Sorokin.
I was going to highlight,
You heard Heiskanen. You hear Tuck. You hear the same guys that, that can pan out. But I think what we're learning right here, just discussing it, is perhaps analyze what league you're in a little bit more, the formats that you're in, and perhaps do not put all your eggs in one fantasy basket, because clearly for your boy right now, not working out so much. However, lots of time left still, and now is not the time to let your foot off the gas, because I can guarantee you, if you don't put in the time now and you're in situations like me, middle of the pack or the end of the pack, you're cooked already. There's no point in even checking in after the second half is done. You got to put that time in. You got to put that work in, and that's why you're listening to this podcast. Mostly Steele at this point, but, I'm here for color commentary. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, and like you can see, it can also be a benefit sometimes, and again, in my case, not to keep, pumping the tires here, but
100%.
like you said, for me, in my case with these two teams, Anthony Stolarz, Martin Necas, Alexander Ovechkin, Moritz Seider, some of those guys that I went back to in both leagues who have really panned out for me, especially in the categorical format. Connor Bedard is one of them who hasn't really panned out as much as I hoped for, but he's still been pretty productive. But yeah, in the same sense, again, Elias Sorokin, Miro Heiskanen, Thomas Harley, some of those guys who just haven't performed. If you got them in both those leagues or multiple leagues, it's just the way it kind of pans out at this point. In that,
go both ways pretty quickly.
It can go both ways pretty quickly. In the same vein, though, in the same breath, some big news from the Vancouver Canucks. J.T. Miller was back in action. He was skating with the team. Still no timeline on when he'll actually be back in game action. Thatcher Demko, though, I believe he will be playing. He did play yesterday, so he's back. He backed up against the Columbus Blue Jackets the other night. So big news for the Vancouver Canucks.
Right.
And getting some two players back at least into practice or into some game action. So big news for the Vancouver Canucks. Big time bets is where we like to get to right now as well.
Yes,
Two
sir.
games on the schedule for Wednesday. Honestly, wasn't really loving this board, but I came up with 3 picks that are my favorites. But I'll throw it to you, my friend. Where are you looking first, and what's your first pick of the night?
Very rarely, I think you and I do an actual parlay. We like same game parlays, or we break down our picks that we like individually. I'm just going to go with a straight up parlay tonight. Anaheim into Ottawa. Both teams are struggling to score right now. This is an ugly one on paper. The total has gone under the number in 6 of the last 7 games between these two, and I'm going to keep going. The total has gone under the number in the last 7 trips from Anaheim into the nation's capital, and the total has gone under the number in 7 of Anaheim's last 8 games overall. I'm going to tease this one up a bit because I could see 4-2, 4-3. I'm going to take it at 7.5 because I'm plugging it into my other 2 picks in this parlay, and we're going to get a bit of a juicier odd steal, and I'll spit it out real fast. Obviously, the other 2 are coming from Rangers, Buffalo. This Buffalo team is bad right now. Real bad, and we covered all the angles. The Rangers are also 12-4 in their last 16 against the Sabres, and I would lean to the under in this one because 8 straight between these two have gone under the number. The Rangers are bad as well, but Buffalo's worse. I know that's not an angle to usually write home about, but I am in this one, and I'm going to parlay Rangers money line with Breadman, anytime assist in 28 career regular season games for Panarin against Buffalo. I always say Panarin for some reason. 22 assists in 28 regular season contests against the Sabres. So under 7.5, Ottawa, Anaheim, Rangers money line, and lock of the night, Breadman, anytime point or assist. Sorry, whatever one you like. I like both.
I got to stay away from it. Again, I mentioned both the Buffalo Sabres in that Red Wings game. I couldn't take the money line in that matchup. I ended up taking the Rangers puck line in that game against the Blackhawks for that exact same reason that they're both playing bad, but it's still the Rangers going up against the Blackhawks. They end up losing. I'm staying away from the money line, puck line in that game. I couldn't do it to myself in back-to-back nights. So I do have a player prop pick from that game. I'm going with Tage Thompson, anytime goal. He's got 4 goals in his last 4. But to me, the Rangers are dead. The Sabres are dead. I'm staying away from the money line until I see at least another win. So it's going to change quickly. So first pick, Tage Thompson, anytime goal. My 2 other picks come from that Ducks Sens game. I'm also with you here. I might tease this up to the under 7.5, but currently I'm going to keep it at the under 6.5 for the exact reasons you said.
I like it.
8 out of the last 10 between these 2 teams have gone under the number. A lot of low-scoring games for them recently. Lucas Dassel, Linus Ullmark getting into shape right now. That's the second pick. Parlaying that with the lock of the night, Stützle, 2+ points in this matchup. He's got multi-point games in his last 2. He's been very solid, very solid for the Ottawa Senators. By far their best player, most consistent player all season long. His playmaking ability is on full display right now. I love what he's been able to do fantasy-wise. Those are the 3 picks. Thompson, anytime goal, under 6.5 in the Ducks Sens game. Lock of the night, Stützle, 2+ points.
I think I'm going to do this to cop out. I'm going to go the under at 7.5, big cop out. I'm going to go Stützle, anytime point, extra big cop out, and I'll put that with Breadman, anytime point. I'm going to rejig that steal. Breadman, anytime point, Stutz, anytime point, and the under 7.5. I like those 3. Let's get after it.
Loving those picks now. Definitely, to me, again, staying away from that money line. That's a personal preference right there in the Rangers-Sabres game. But if you like it, you do you out there. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Once again, for your second listen, you got to go check out the Locked On NHL podcast. The link is in the description below, so you don't have to go searching for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. From both Flip and I, we wish you good luck with your bets tonight, your weekly matchups, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.